Awesome. So welcome to today's Sports Analytics Club meeting. Today is August 30th. We are going to do an introduction to the programming language of R. We call those our intro tutorials. This is number 1 for the season, semester, whatever. This is a picture of our men's soccer team from this past weekend where they had a great win. Pat can probably tell you who they beat. It was USC Upstate, I believe.
2-0 over USC Upstate.
Yep. And these are the red tears in the background. That is our student section. If you ever had a chance to go stand in the student section during those games, it's always a lot of fun. So with that, we're going to play Kahoot. No prizes this week, but we hope everybody has a good time. And there's our sign-in form if you did not get the link as well. So let's go ahead and play Kahoot.
I know none.
Anybody prefer if I have the music on or off? Kahoot music rocks, of course. Let's see, we have 60 people in the call, minus 2 of me because I have 2 screens. Should leave 58 people to join the Kahoot if everybody decides to play. Actually, 57 because Luke can play because he made the Kahoot. That would be cheating.
All right, you and Ryan.
All right, we're going to give it about 20 more seconds, and then we're going to go ahead and start. All right, let's go. So this is for our intro 1 meeting. Question number 1 for the Kahoot. NC State kicks off its football season this Thursday against which team? South Florida. Question 2. Cristiano Ronaldo has shocked the world by signing with which soccer club? With his famous statue that looks absolutely nothing like him. Signed with Man U. Question 3. Which baseball team currently sits atop of the AL East? The Rays, one of my favorite teams. I got 2. The O's in your heart, Jacob. Keep dreaming. Question 4. Which 3-way trade sent the Bulls player to the Cavs? The NBA's 3-way trade that happened this past week. Sent Ari. Question 5, which legendary quarterback was traded to the Eagles over the weekend? That would be Minshew Mania. Question 6, Lily World Series Gavin Weir represents what state? Man threw like 4 no-hitters this summer, gave up 1 hit in 8 different appearances. If there wasn't a pitch limit, he would have had like every game was as a no-hitter. He was absolutely insane. Representing the state of South Dakota. The Orioles could use him. First college football game of the 2021 season involved which 2 teams? Happened this past Saturday.
Did anyone see that stat of the Orioles pitcher Paul Fry from yesterday? In his last 5 appearances against the Rays, he's pitched an inning and a third with 15 earned runs in 105 pitches.
It's brutal.
So you're telling me that man's not even good enough for the Orioles?
We sent him down yesterday, so yes.
So that's Nebraska, Illinois played on Saturday in that awful, very slow game. Top 5 recruit in basketball, Imani Bates committed to what school? Unfortunately, it is not NC State. If you did not know that, that is disappointing, but it is what it is. He committed to Memphis. He is still a winner. Next question. What 3 conferences form an alliance with each other? If you came to the meeting on Tuesday last week, I said this incorrectly, so that is my fault. That's what happens when I don't proofread my own quizzes. The ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 have a scheduling alliance. The SWAC powerhouse. Which star rookie suffered a season-ending injury in a preseason NFL game? All right. Next question. Which former NC State football player put up a sack, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown for Illinois this weekend?
He looked really good, by the way, if anyone got to watch any of that game.
Calvin Hart Jr. Huh. Did not know that. Next question. Which NHL franchise has the most Stanley Cups of any American team? In case you're wondering, Luke, yes, I changed some of the answer choices on this one. Be the Detroit Red Wings. Red Wings. Who is NC State's only first overall pick in the NBA draft? David Thompson. How many College World Series appearances has NC State made? That'd be baseball for those that are curious. Made 3, including last year. Next question: what was the winningest season in NC State football history? Right now it's 2002. Hopefully it's 2021. Gotta have faith. Next question: who's NC State's all-time leader in rushing yards and touchdowns? Philip Rivers. Yes. No, it's Ted Brown. Next question: which country has won the most World Cups? Be Brazil. All right. Getting down to it. There's a couple people still in it. Question 18: true or false? Lakers and the Celtics account for more than half of the NBA's total championships. That is false. All right. 19: which NFL player has the most MVPs in league history? It is not Patrick Mahomes, unfortunately. Not yet. Maybe in a few years. We'll see how he keeps on doing. But it would be Peyton Manning, of course. Last question: who is the MLB's all-time leader in stolen bases? That is true. Mitch Trubisky does have the record for the most MVPs, Nickelodeon valuable players. That's great. Ricky Henderson just stole 1 billion bases for the Athletics back in the day. All right. Going to the podium. Third place, Ian. Second place, Nate. And first place, Hayden. Nice work, everyone. And then fourth and fifth place, congrats to y'all as well. All right. Going back to our slides. If you didn't get a chance to sign in, I would really like if you did that. So there's the link for that with the QR code. Or we have the link right there in the chat. Now I just put it in as well. We do have a few announcements. First of which is we are not going to be meeting next Monday. Next Monday is Labor Day. So we are taking the week off. Later in the semester, we have like fall break. We will make that meeting up, but not this week. So no meeting next Monday. The next few slides are about different conferences that are coming up that we kind of want to introduce you to. The first is Nessus. Nessus is a conference about sports analytics. It occurs, normally it's a one-time thing, but this year they're doing it. It's a recurring series every Friday in October. So the link for the website will be linked on the slides. I'll be sent out later, as well as in the chat for the Zoom call for those watching live. The times kind of vary based on the day. So sometimes I think it was like 10 to 12, sometimes 1 to 3. Conference is a good thing to attend. We'll talk more about those with some of these other ones. The next one is UConn Sports Analytics Symposium. I got to go to this one last year and really enjoyed it. Again, link in the chat and on the slide for later. There's a $5 cost for this one, which is really, really cheap compared to many other conferences. Nessus was free, didn't mention that. One of the cool things that makes UConn special is that they have programming tutorials that are a little bit more advanced than this one if you want, but there's also some that are more specialized. So for example, Megan Hall is someone that's doing hockey tutorials for those interested in that. Even if you're not interested in a certain sport they may be talking about, it's still worth going to those conferences and going to those talks just to see how you can take something from one sport and apply it to another. The third conference that we want to talk about is Carnegie Mellon's conference. Carnegie Mellon's conference is known as one of the best across the industry, whether you're working for a team, if you're in academia, no matter what, it's always great. So there's a poster contest for that. The dates are November 6th and 7th. That's a weekend. It's a virtual conference. Speakers, price is usually about $10. I don't think they've announced exactly this year, exactly what it costs. But like I said, the link will be on the slides. That'll be sent out later, as well as in the chat for those watching live. Any questions about conferences or any other announcements that need to be made, please feel free to unmute and say them. I know there's a soccer game coming up Friday. It's a big one. And then the football game on Thursday as well, but I'm sure everybody's heard that by now. Volleyball on Friday. I think they play Friday and Saturday, like 3 games in 2 days. They're playing like Wofford and a few other teams that hopefully we'll beat if we can actually pass the ball. That's huge. Anyways, moving along, we have our intro tutorial number 1. So like I said, we are going to be programming a lot in this club. So we need to actually get those foundational skills built up so that we can learn how to do our own type of analysis. So last meeting, whoa, my computer's not liking me right now. Last meeting, we talked about downloading R and RStudio. So we're going to use RStudio that we downloaded last meeting to do some stuff. So let's open up RStudio. If you don't know how to find it, you can kind of use your little search bar or navigate through files and find RStudio. For those that weren't here, joined the call late, I have 2 screens so I can kind of keep on track. If you have questions as we go along this tutorial, feel free to ask them in the chat. If you want to ask them privately, I would ask you message David Roycroft. He's probably the other board member that has a lot of experience with R. I can help you out more privately. But if you want to ask questions that are open to everyone, feel free to type in the chat and David will answer. Or if he doesn't know, he will unmute and let me know as well. This meeting has kind of a lot of content, so we want to get through it all for future tutorials that we get the skills that we need to do. So to open up a new R script, which is where you actually type your code, you click this up here. This has the new file button. Oh, dark mode. I will explain that one first. That's a good idea. So you click on the tools tab up here, and then you go down to global options. Finally, you go to appearance, and you can change your different RStudio themes. I just choose Sky, and then your editor font as well. That's for like what font it's in. The editor theme is what you use to change from light mode to dark mode, if that's something you prefer. One of the things I would also recommend is here in code, it says, where exactly is this? Display. You click code and then display. Then you do show white space characters. So that shows when you hit a space or had a tab character, kind of just lets you see those in person as well. So that's super important. Rainbow parentheses are useful too for when you're doing more complicated stuff. I don't think today it'll be much of use, but later on it might be. So wanted to point those features out as well. Anyways, going back to the originally planned conversation, to create a new file, you'd click new file and then R script. Should pop open pretty much like what looks like a blank canvas. This is where we want, if we want to type code and save it, this is what we need to use as an R script. So when we're programming, there are these things called variables. Variables are what we use to store data or other values. So there are 2 main types of variables. There's integer and character variables. So we can name our variables whatever we want. So if we want to call it character variable, and then we have to assign it. So this is called our assignment operator. If you're used to other programming languages, such as Python, you may use the equal sign. Otherwise, in R, we use kind of the assignment arrow. The way you can do that is that less than sign and then the dash, or you can click Alt and the dash, and it kind of does that automatically. So to assign a numeric variable, all you have to do is type it. So let's say we want to assign the number 12 to the, character variable. Character variables need to go inside quotes. So if we want to type in Wolfpack as our variable, we can do that. And then we can highlight it and click the run button, which is about right here. Or I prefer to click Control Enter. Once you run a variable, it shows up in your environment over here, what is stored. Like I said, we also have numeric variables. These can be used to save numbers. So if I want to say the number 12, it's the same process. You just don't put the quotes around it. To look what's inside a variable, you can either use the print statement, and it prints it out down here in the console, or you can just type the name of the variable that you want to print. And it does the same thing there as well. So this is useful if you wanted to store single values, but sometimes we want to store multiple values at once. One of the things that we can use for that is a vector. So a vector has to have items of the same type. So if we want to put a vector of values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we can do that. And it shows up in our environment when we run it the same exact way. So as you can see, it says numeric 1 through 5. It shows that our type is numeric for this whole entire vector and that there's 5 elements in it. Those elements are in order 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Vectors can also be used to store character variables and can vary in length. So if we want to put NC, state, and Wolfpack, we can have that vector as a length of 3. And it's a character variable with the elements NC, state, and Wolfpack. So as we talked about earlier, we can use a print statement on those to see what's inside of our vectors. Vector. You got to make sure to spell stuff correctly, or else you'll kind of get the computer lost. If we want to look inside the second one, similar process. So to see what kind of an object something is, we can use the class function. So let's look at the class of vector2. It popped out character because it is all character variables inside of this vector. Some other types that we use will pop up different answers. So for example, if we did class of numeric variable, it pops up numeric. So what if we want to look at a certain item inside of a vector? The way we can do that is through what's called indexing. So if we look at vector 2 and we want to pull out the word state, we have to count what index it's at. So this is the first element and this is the second element. So if we want to pull out state, we need to do the number 2. And we put that inside of a single parentheses. When we do vector 2, we're looking inside vector 2 at the second element, which is state. And that's what happens when we run that. So if we wanted to pull out Wolfpack, how would we do that? Does anyone want to try to speak out loud and share how we would do that? Oh, got some questions. I have nothing showing up on my values on the right. Have you tried highlighting it and then clicking the run function or clicking Control Enter to run those statements? Yes, vector 2 bracket 3 would be perfect for accessing Wolfpack. Good job, everyone that answered that. You can see it pops up Wolfpack down here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on, and hopefully you guys can figure out the issues you may be having in the chat. Okay, sweet, you got it. So you may be tempted to try to combine numeric and character variables in the same vector. So let's try that. So let's say we want vector 3 to have the numbers 1, 2, 3, as well as Howling Cow ice cream. I really want some Howling Cow ice cream. So we run it, it looks like it's good. We have our vector, it has all of our things. However, it is a character variable. That is not what we want. You can't add the strings or the character variables 1 and 2. If we had it in quotes, we can see that we get an error when we run this in R. It's not numeric. So this tells us that we cannot combine numeric and character variables inside of the same vector. That's something that's really important to do. What it does, it converts everything to a character string. There is another type of data that is called a list. We won't discuss that today. You can combine character and numeric variables in a similar way as a vector. There are other forms of data structures that I just think are a little bit more important than list right now for the time that we have set up for today. Another data structure is what's called the matrix. So if you're taking Math 3 or in other parts of the country, it's called Algebra 2. You may have learned about matrices and different stuff that you can do with those. So we want to talk about those here as well. So we're going to make a matrix called mat. And to make a matrix, we use the matrix function. So let's say we want the numbers 1 through 12. If you want a sequence of numbers, you put a colon in between the two values. Then we can specify the number of rows that we want and the number of columns that we want. So when we run it, we can see it shows up here under data, and we have what looks a little bit different. It has 4 rows and 3 columns in the values. So to look at it, we can do mat, and it prints it out here in the console, or we can use the view statement. Oh, sorry. We will talk about that in a bit for something else. So we can access different values in the matrix in a similar way that we did values in a vector. So if we want to pull out this number 10, the way that we do that is we use the mat, because that's what we called it, and we go row by column. So the number 10 is in the second row, 1, 2, and the third column. So this is column 1, 2, 3. So inside of these brackets, we type in 2, 3. When we run it, it does evaluate to the number 10. So looking at mat again, if we wanted to pull out this number 8, can someone else in the chat help us and type out what that would look like? And just so I can see kind of everybody's following. Okay. If we want to pull out the number 8, mat 4, 2. Good job, everyone. That's how we get that number 8. So there are ways, if you want to pull out an entire row or an entire column, we can do that too. So if we do mat 4, what that's going to do is going to look in column 4, because it's blank, it's going to pull out the entire row. So mat 4, does the values 4, 8, and 12. Looking at mat again, we do the similar to pull out an entire column. We can do mat, 2 to get this column 5, 6, 7, 8. We look at that, and that is correct. Matrices also need to be all of one type. I think those may just be all numeric. I'd have to double check that. I don't really use matrices that much because there's another type of data structure that I like to use more often. That's called a data frame. Data frames are really nice because you can combine numeric elements, character elements, vectors. It can store pretty much whatever you want. So to make a data frame, you use the data.frame function. What's nice about data frames is you can name your columns as well. So we're going to make a data frame on our own. It's different players in different sports. So if we want to do names, we're going to put some players in here. So Tom Brady, Jackie Robinson, and Kobe Bryant. Then we want to add another column. So we put a comma and then start naming our second column. We're going to call it number. We're going to put their numbers. So Tom Brady is TV 12, Jackie Robinson 42, and Kobe Bryant we're going to just put as 8 for now. So we run that and we can see something else that showed up inside of our data. So to look at that, you can use the view function to look at the data frame. Oh, sorry, it needs to be a capital V. And as you can see, it looks more like a spreadsheet that you've seen before. So Tom Brady is number 12, Jackie Robinson number 42, Kobe Bryant number 8. David answered in the chat to answer my question that I asked. You make a matrix of character values, but they aren't that useful. Yes, I agree. I prefer data frames. Data frames are a little bit more useful when mixing those. Yep, to make a data frame, use data.frame. Then we need to make the names of our columns, so name and number. And we use the C to make a vector as we did up here. And we put all the values that we want inside of our vectors. So name, Tom Brady, Jackie Robinson, Kobe Bryant, as well as numbers 12, 42, and 8. So that's cool. But what happens if we want to add another player to our data set? Well, we can do that too. We use the rbind function, which stands for row bind. So we want to assign this to the df variable that we made earlier. Then we're going to do rbind. We want to bind what's currently in df and then our new player that we want to add. So let's say we want to add Rafael Nadal. Nadal is a tennis star for those that are unfamiliar with the sport. And in tennis, they don't have numbers. So when you have missing data, NA stands for not available, lots of other acronyms you can use. So if we run it, we look at our df up here, we added that extra row on the bottom by using the rbind function, which stands for row bind. So it has Nadal on there without a number. If we want to add a column, there's a couple different ways that we can do that too. So we can use a similar function to rbind. It's called cbind. So we want to cbind data frame, which is what we currently have. And we can add another column called sport that tells us what sport the players play. So Brady plays football. Robinson played baseball. Kobe played basketball. And Nadal played tennis. Let me put a couple spaces so I can see all my code. So we run that. We have that new column in our data frame. Tom Brady football, Robinson baseball, Bryant basketball, Nadal tennis. There's another way of adding columns that I just find more useful. It's called the $ notation. So if we use a $ and then what we want our new column to be named, we do df $ and we're going to do what country they're from. And on the other side of our assignment operator, we put what we want them to include in that new column. So the countries, everyone that we've mentioned is from the United States, except for Nadal, who's from Spain. We look at our new data frame now, it has that new country column added back. The $ notation is also used to look at just what's in certain columns. So if we want to look at the sports that everybody plays, we can use data frame $ sport. And it comes out with all the sports they played. Just a heads up for everybody, I will be sharing the code out later. It may look a little bit different, but it still teaches everything the same way. Similar to that, if you're getting confused in your code already, imagine putting down this code and coming back to it several weeks later, and you would just have no idea what it was. So there's something that's very, very important called commenting your code. Does not matter what you code in, what language, there's always some way to comment and leave notes to yourself. So in R, we do this by using the # or the hashtag sign, whatever you prefer to call it. And you can just type little notes yourself. So this is assigning variables. This section we can call printing. We can call these vectors, matrices. Typically, it's comments with just like super small. We can do those on a similar line. So this is accessing element 2,3 in our matrix. And what I do is if I'm having a larger heading, I do a lot of these hashtags as kind of like a header in a sense, just because it stands out from the rest of the code because it's a different color and it looks a little bit different as well. So this is making data frames. That's a habit that I have. When you program a lot, you'll pick up your own habits, hopefully good habits, and you'll learn, hey, I like doing this. It helps me keep organized. and it helps other people read your code afterwards as well. A very important thing in R is one of the reasons that we chose it are these things called packages. So I'll make a new header for packages. Packages are really neat because they allow you to share code back and forth. So not everybody's trying to make the exact same code all the time. What the first thing you need to do for a package is to install the package. So we do this by doing the install.packages function. The first package I want you to download is the tidyverse package. Tidyverse package has lots of other different packages involved with it. It's a really great package. Even for experts, beginners, there's a ton of things that you can do with this. When you install a package, you only need to install it once. I've already installed it on my computer, so I'm not going to run this code, but if this is your first time using R, feel free to actually install it. I'm just going to comment it out for now. You should get a bunch of messages and stuff popping up on your screen. That is totally normal. Once you install it once, you're good forever, or at least until you update your R. But don't worry about that. All right, so installing your package is great, but we actually want to use the stuff inside of the package. To use the stuff inside of the package, we use the library function. It's like pulling a book off of a shelf so that we're able to open it up and look inside it. So we're going to use library tidyverse. And so that pulls into the packages and lets us know, all right, everything's good to go. In my opinion, tidyverse is one of the best overall collectors of packages in R. It includes packages such as ggplot2 for graphics and other very important data manipulation packages such as Tibble, tidyr, readr, purr, dippler, stringer, and forcats. We'll discuss some of those packages and some of the stuff that's in tidyverse later on today, as well as in other weeks. The other package that we're going to use today is called the layman package. So we'll use install.packages, layman. So without the comment, this is what that should look like. So you would run that, and then we're going to need to library that as well.
Wait, what
At this
does
point, what's up?
Sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you want to ask questions, now is the perfect time. So before I move on, I want to kind of open it up. If you want to unmute and ask questions, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, what does a library do again? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, so what library does, it's like pulling the book off of a shelf and opening it up so you can actually use the packages. Another way is you can buy groceries all you want by installing packages, but unless you actually pull them out of the pantry, you'll never be able to actually use those. So library allows us to use to actually use the functions inside of packages.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Any more questions? Doesn't have to be. It can be from something further back or anything along those lines. Any other questions? Kind of looking over the chat. Okay. Seems like everybody's getting it. How do you delete a row? You can use, yes, we are going to use the layman packages. How do you delete a row? So one of the things we talked about up here is that you can index. You can do the same thing for data frames as well. So let's say we don't like Tom Brady because no one does, even though he's on my fantasy league this year. Unfortunately, I didn't get Mahomes. So we can use the minus. If we want to minus the first row, which is Brady, we can do -1, comma. Assign that to data frame. So if we look inside data frame now, we have Robinson, Bryant, Nadal, but we do not have Tom Brady in our data frame anymore. Does that help take care of your question? Does that make sense? We can do the same for column. So let's say we don't need the nations column. We can do data frame, df, comma, because we want all the rows, but minus that one column. That got rid of the names, which is not what I wanted to do. But if I had counted correctly, I would have done -4, and it will have taken away that country column. There are easier ways to get rid of columns. I'll talk about those in a second with some functions from tidyverse. I love using the tidyverse. It is so great compared to all the indexing. It's a little bit messy at times. So I haven't introduced the layman data sets well. Layman data sets are a collection of data going back to the 1880s. It just has a bunch of stats in baseball. So to learn more about the layman data sets, or if you have questions about other functions in R, you can use the question. I think David might have mentioned this in the chat earlier. You can use the question mark and then type what you need help with. So let's say layman. We run that. It gives us a little help pane over here in the right corner. So this is about Sean Layman's baseball data set. So it includes data from 1871 to 2019, the different leagues. And let's say if we want to learn more about some other functions, cbind, rbind, we can do that here as well. So there's the cbind function. But now is the time I kind of want to dig into the layman data sets a little bit. So we're going to go mostly with data frames in this. We shouldn't really use just regular character variables and integer variables. Data frames are what we use because data sets are pretty big. So we're going to make a new variable called layman B. And we're going to use the batting data set. This is a data set that is currently in the layman package. Next is a weird character. It's called the pipe. It looks like a percent sign, a greater than sign, and another percent sign. So you can type that out manually, or there's a keyboard shortcut. It is Control-Shift-M, which is very nifty, especially if you don't want to type a lot, which is what I will be using. And what that does, it allows us to chain functions next to each other. So if you're more of an English person trying to figure it out, it means then. So first we want to use the batting, and then we're going to do some other stuff. So the other stuff that we're going to do is we're going to select certain columns from it. So we use the select column to pick out certain columns that we want from the batting data set. So the columns I want to pull are, we're going to list these as a vector, player ID. We're going to pull year ID. We're going to pull games, :H. What that does, it pulls all columns between games and hits, G and H. And then two more columns, RBI and home runs. When we run this, we do have something in our environment. If we look at it, it has all of our players, the years they played in, how many games, at bats, runs, hits, RBIs, and homers they had that year. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at a different data set, and we're going to try to combine these letters so we can do some more analysis, because some of these player IDs are a little bit random. You don't exactly, you can kind of tell how it's paired up. We'll talk about that later, how exactly they're paired up. But we do want the actual names so that we can kind of coordinate there. So now we're going to look at personal data. This was about batting data. So the data set we want to look at, we're going to call our new data set layman P, and we're going to do the people variables. Yes, R is case sensitive. Some other programming languages such as SAS are not case sensitive. You very much need to make sure you have your capitalizations correct. So we have a couple of variables that we want to pull those columns as well. So what function do we need to use? If you want to type it in the chat or unmute, that's cool with me. I just kind of want to get a little bit of feedback. What column or what function do we use? Yes, we use the Control-Shift-M to make the pipe. Now we're going to use the select function to pick out the columns that we want. The columns that we want from this personal data or this people data set is the player ID, the name first, and name last. What's the sign after the pipe? So I talked about this earlier. This is your white space characters. The little dot stands for that I put a space there. And then the little thing that goes over and down means I hit enter and there's a new line character. So if you want to select those, that's good. So let's look at it real quick. So our Layman P, and then we have our last name and our first name. That's cool, but it would be better if we just had these kind of together in one variable, had the complete name. So we can use another pipe and use the mutate function. The mutate function adds on a column to an existing data frame. So this column, we want to call it name. And then we want to be those two things pasted together or concatenated, if you've heard of that before. In R, this is with the paste function. So what do we want to paste together? The first name and the last name. You can see wrong data frame. We want we want Hank Aaron, we want Tommy Aaron, those kind of names put together. So then we run it again, we can look, and we have our new name. And it has the first and the last name together. Now that we have this name all in one column, we don't need these anymore. So we can drop these two columns. So someone asked earlier, what's the easiest way to get rid of columns? I think it is with the select function. So we're going to use the select function again. So select, this time we're going to put a minus sign, which means we want to drop these columns. We want to drop name first and name last. So someone's having issues getting the pipe to work. You need to install the package tidyverse. If you've installed it and libraried it, then something's wrong, but make sure you install it first and then library on tidyverse to make sure it all works. Just maybe a troubleshooting there. Anyways, back to dropping those two columns. So now if we look in Layman P, what it does, it looks as people data set, selects the columns, mutates that new column name first and name last, and then the select to get the first and last name and get rid of those two columns that are individual. So now we have the player ID and the name. Why did I use the C for Layman B, but not on select for Layman P? I believe it's up to you. So you can choose whether you use the C or not. When you're dropping columns, you do need to use the C. Or I believe you can also put a minus in front of all the variables that you want to drop. I'd have to double check that, but it's kind of a preference thing. I like using the C when I'm doing the minus. I don't when I'm just selecting certain ones I want to keep. It's kind of give and take there. Does that help answer your question, Andrew? Checking in the chat. All right, thumbs up. So we're good to go. So we look at Layman P and we have Layman B. So there is one variable that is in the same between these two. It's the player ID. Another way you can check this is by looking at the names of the variables. Names of the columns. And you do that by using the names function. So we want to look at the names of Layman B. It says we have player ID, year, games, at bats, runs, hits, RBIs, and homers. Whereas the names of Layman P, are player ID and name. So if we want to put these two data sets together, we're going to use the merge function. So I'm going to make a new data set called Layman Big because it's a big data set that has both of those together. And we're going to use the merge function. Whoa, 1 second. Sorry. The merge function to merge Layman B and Layman P. Now we need something that we need to merge them by. So we're going to use by equals and then the name of the variable that we want to combine them with. So player ID, because there's a player ID in both, that's an equal matching. So we look at Layman Big, it ran. So let's look at it. And it has our player ID, our year ID, all of our stats variables that we want to look at, as well as the player name, which is really nice because now we have all of our data in one spot. So one of the nice things is that we can rearrange these columns by using the select function. Select function is used for adding and dropping for selecting columns, as well as rearranging the order that we want. So one of the ideal things that you can do is you have player ID, and then we want to put that name column. Kind of makes sense. because you can see, all right, who did what, all these things, rather than seeing all the things they did and then seeing who did it. So we can look at it, basically moving this column here. However, we'd have to type all of these names out. But there's a better way of doing this. There's a function that you would do inside this select statement. It only works inside of a select statement and a few certain other ones. It's called everything. And what it does is it says, do the columns in order that we want, and then everything else goes in order the way it's currently is. So when we run it, we can look in Layman Big. It has our player ID, our name like we asked. Then everything else is in the same order. So year, games, at bats, runs, etc. Any questions about selecting and mutating? Feel free to type those in the chat. We are almost done. We are going to run up right on it as well. The time limit at 8. But we have 2 more things I kind of want to talk about. Could you do the same thing for rows? Yes, there is a way to rearrange rows. I'm just about to get to that. It is not with a select function, however. With that being said, we'll go ahead and do that. So we're going to make a final data set. We want to look at who has the most home runs in history in a single season. So we're going to make a data set called Layman HR, which stands for Layman home runs. What data set do we want to start with? Well, we want to start with Layman Big. Then we're going to use the pipe, which means then. Now there's a new function I want to introduce you to called filtering. Filtering says, all right, we want only rows that meet this certain qualification. So it's like meeting a qualification or a cutoff. So we want to filter by people whose home runs are greater than or equal to 30 for one season. So if we run it, we can look. There are 1,376 people that have hit over 30 home runs in one season, each year counting differently. But now that doesn't help us see who's hit the most. So what we can do is we can use the arrange function. Arrange function is for arranging rows and moving the order of those. Select function is for picking the order that we want the columns to be in, or picking columns in particular. And finally, the filter function is for setting a cutoff or limitations on our data. So if we want to filter by home runs. I'm sorry, we want to arrange by home runs. We want to arrange our rows by home runs. So if we look, has Hank Aaron up at the top with, I can't see that number, say 95. I think it does. Nope, 30 home runs. So in order to see who hit the most, that's just our minimum cutoff. We use the descending function, DESC. That way it starts with the person that hit the most home runs and goes down from there. So in Layman HR, we can see Barry Bonds hit the most home runs. That sounds about right. 73 home runs in one season. Absolutely incredible if he wasn't on steroids. Oh well. So then, as you can see, we may have some ties further down. So we want to see, how do we sort those? One way that we can do that is we can say add more things to our range function. So we want to say, let's say, who had the most RBIs. So we're going to sort by home runs, then by RBIs, descending, because we want to see who hit the most. And then finally, if worst comes to worst, we'll just sort by name and say, all right, whoever hit the most, congratulations. We're just going to sort you by name. So as we can see, that's made a few changes here and there. So Babe Ruth goes before Giancarlo Stanton because he had more RBIs. If we move further down where there's a lot of ties, so like here with 41, it goes by RBIs, and then it goes by name order. So like I said, any more questions? We talked about, just as a review, different data structures up here, as well as getting into data frames, which is kind of the meat of what we're going to be doing this semester. Talk about commenting to our code and why that's important. There's many reasons. I will get rather upset if you don't comment your code, because that means it's harder for people to figure out what's going on and people to help you, as well as get feedback from other people. We talked about packages and how to library those so that we can pull them off the shelf and look at what's in them. Finally, we got into some data manipulation with the layman data sets using the select function, the mutate function, as well as the merge, filter, and arrange functions. We also talked about how to get help by using the question mark and how to look at the names of columns of data frame using the names function. To save our code, we can hit the little floppy disk and then save it in a spot where you know it is. I'll just call it intro 1 and save it to my desktop. That's where I like to keep a lot of my things are on the desktop. All right, with that being said, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to come off of mute and ask out loud, or if you want to ask in the chat, that is perfectly fine too. Hopefully I didn't scare too many people away with a lot of code very fast. If you did like this, please, let me know. Just kind of want to get feedback of where did this go right? Where did this go wrong? What you liked, didn't like about it. Feel free to share any of that. I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can pull back up our slides. Professor Billy, don't even start, Jacob. So that was our intro 1 tutorial. Lots of people like to make jokes in R and capitalize the R. So like there's a bunch of R packages that's like swimmer, but it has a capital R. I'll type it in the chat. Something like, it's kind of nerdy, but it is what it is. Puns are good. You go to NC State, there's a billion puns they can do. Anyways, other questions? If you didn't get the sign in form, feel free to scan the QR code down here in the corner and sign in. What is the name of the YouTube channel this videos are posted on? Should be NC State Sports Analytics Club. If you can't find it, we will be linking this in the email that we send out either tonight or tomorrow. Just kind of depends on how much I get the recording and if I can get it quick enough out there, whether the email's tonight or tomorrow. Yep, watching it back on YouTube will be kind of nice, especially if I went a little bit fast. You can try stuff on your own. Oh, I like this. I didn't like this. Oh, I want to add a different player to this data frame that we talked about with Kobe, Jackie Robinson, and other people. Yes, absolutely would 10 out of 10 recommend that. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at sportsanalytics@ncsu.edu. We'll respond to that pretty quickly with questions, or if you have other concerns about the club in general. With that, that should be the end of our meeting. So feel free to stay on and ask questions if you want. Otherwise, we're going to stop recording and we will see you guys in 2 weeks because we're not meeting next week. The YouTube channel is Sports Analytics Club at NC State.